My pleasure, and our pleasure, the Language Center presents John Maddox. John is, you read his little bio in the flyer that was sent out. I'm not going to repeat that. But I'll tell you quickly about John. I met John in July of 2015 at the American Association of Teachers of Spanish and Portuguese in Denver, Colorado. And people often poo-poo AATSP, but it's been the one place I've been a member since 1973. It's been the one place in my career in which I have been able to make friends, colleagues who become my friends. These great P1 publications and these other conferences, they may say they're your friends. They're not. AATSP truly develops friends. So I've always told you, please go and join. Here's a result of what happens when you go to AATSP. So my friend Mary Maddox, who's a graduate of our department, she teaches at the University of Louisville, has a doctorate in Spanish from here, said, you need to meet this nice young man. I met him on the bus from the airport. He's going to come to our presentation. I said, oh, great. And I'll be darned if he didn't come to our presentation, ask 50 questions, and was it the same year I said I need help with my research? And was it the same conference I said, I made the decision. I want him to join my work. And I made him the head honcho. So his name is first on the book. And will be from now on. And it's his research. He has access to anything that I have on the dictionary of Latin American identities. John is a Southerner, like I am. That's not the reason I love him. He married a Brazilian. That's not the reason I love him. Luciana Silva is right here. She has a doctorate from the University of Georgia where they met. He taught 5 years in Georgia while she finished her doctorate. And then they went to Vanderbilt and he finished his doctorate. Right? So that's a real love partnership, I think. John is going to talk today about some of the work that exists in this dictionary, but if you get him started, like we did this summer at AATSP, he'll talk the entire hour and never give us anybody else, but he'll talk on the same slide. He may have one slide that he'll talk about, which is what happened this summer. I never presented my paper in the summer. He's forever going to live with that because he talked for now. What happened was the people in the audience were they started asking questions and it just mushroomed. So I wasn't going to stop that. That was great. I enjoyed it. So John is going to present his work, our work, mostly his work because I didn't do this, on Portuguese and Spanish and French applications from this work. So John, Luciana, welcome to Rutgers.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you all for being here. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be here. I have a stopwatch. I'm sure you're terrified after that introduction regarding the presentation. And I looked at the list, and everybody's a Spanish teacher. So I'm going to touch on the French, but I'm going to try to move past it. The good thing about the French side is it may change how some of us see Latin America. Hi, buenos dias, welcome. Okay, so this is a dictionary that is talking about identities. It used to be racial and ethnicity terms, but I just wanted to get a few simple things out of the way, is that when I'm talking about race, when we're talking about race, we're not talking about biology, or we're not talking exclusively about biology. I mean, we all have different bodies, but those are filtered through language, culture, and different forces in power. Okay, if you want to read more on that, Stuart Hall has a brilliant piece on race as a language. If you guys read Foucault, Society Must Be Defended, Omian Winant, racialization projects like colonial projects, Fanon, Grossfogel is our contemporary that works on race. So when I say race, I'm talking about symbols that are filtered through culture, filtered through power, and that's one reason you need a dictionary to see how these things evolve over time, how they are used, and in many cases, the harm that they do. And we're going to talk a little bit about the harm that's been done, as well as how people have changed these signifiers to mean new things. It's also going to be intersecting with gender, okay? The famous quote there is Sojourner Truth's question, well, ain't I a woman? And this is the 19th century, right? So you're looking at being a woman, yes, but being a white woman in a racist world, or being a black woman in a racist world. So power is also imbued in our terms for race, and it intersects with gender. It's going to intersect with sexuality, and so I want people to take a step back from the notion of biology. Yes, it's a code to describe the body, but that code is always filtered through unequal power relations. So what am I adding to the discussion? What did we add to the discussion? We've got 3 languages, as well as their creoles. We've got Spanish, Portuguese, and now French in the new edition, as well as their creoles. If you go to Palenque, Colombia, we were just talking about Colombia, you've got people that were quote-unquote lost. They didn't go anywhere, they knew they were there, but they were lost to the quote-unquote outside world for 300 years, and they developed a Creole language. Not everybody hears about Palenquero as a Creole in the Spanish-speaking world. If you guys want to learn more about the dictionary, you can check us out online. Anton Garcia Fernandez interviewed us on YouTube. Tell us a little bit more about that. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the French or French-speaking people and the notion of Latin America. We're going to look at Spanish as well as Latinx identity or Latinx identity, Afro descent, as well as Brazil. I'm going to be shooting for a 30-minute presentation, maybe a couple of minutes over, and then 30 minutes of conversation with you guys. So let's see. We'll start out with a simple question. What are we talking about here? Where is Latin America? What do we mean when we say that?
That is a trick question for you, not for me. But give them your ideas. Come on. You guys always talk.
So
Yes.
probably like all the countries that come after like colonization of Spain with this idea of being Latin in relation with like Rome and everything that is Latin. And now we talk about Latino, and people normally think that it's a term that is used to describe Latin America, but the origin is this idea of coming back to the period of like Rome and Renaissance and everything else.
That's a good answer. Other?
And
Yes.
I just wanted to add on to what you said. It's not just the colonization of Spain, but also Portugal, so it includes Brazil as well.
Okay, that's another good answer.
And what about the Francophone Caribbean, for example? Like they were colonized by the French, and French is also the Romance language.
Right. So you're getting into why the dictionary has 3 different languages. Technically, you're right, and you're right, and you're right, depending on who you ask. This is not a trick question, and I'll show you exactly why it's not. So where is Latin America not? We are what we are, and we're also not what we're not, right? There's the self and the other. Who's the other in this relationship?
Europe.
Oh, it's definitely not Europe, okay, because Europe, it represents whom in this relationship?
The colonizer?
Yeah, the colonizer, right? So there's the colonizer.
This is an undergraduate.
And colonized,
Okay,
okay.
let me know.
Okay. Any other? Is Europe the only colonizer?
Come on, guys.
North America.
North America, okay, United States, okay. It's definitely not the gringos, okay. That's one thing that all Latin Americans can agree on. We're definitely not gringos or gringas or gringues, okay. It is descended from Rome, and that's going to interact with the powers that be that use language. Gringo, your professor probably already told you this. What is the origin of that term? That's in the dictionary, so that's our first ethnic term here, ethno-racial term.
You all know how to use it, right?
Gringo,
Gringo.
que se vaya.
Yeah.
Okay, gringo home. Okay, we don't want you here. Okay? Other etymologies? That was my answer too when, when Tom asked me. Actually, that's something we just heard. Like Luciana and I were just in Ecuador, and they gave us the same etymology, and it makes sense. Why does the story make sense? Why would a Latin American person want to say "green, go home"? Why are they saying green, and why are they telling them to go home?
Army perhaps wears green, so they're telling people we're dressed in camouflage to go back.
Right. So yeah. So stop meddling in our country's affairs. All right. And they do so through the military and La CIA. Right. You got the CIA is meddling in other countries' business. So it's what you call a folk etymology. Right. It's not the actual thing that happened, but it makes sense to people and it sticks with people because there's an element of truth to it. That actually came later. And gringo actually comes from from the word for foreigner. Who did Shakespeare use to represent the foreigner? The person that you don't understand. It was...
It's all blank to me.
It's Greek to me.
There you go.
Greek,
Bingo.
right?
It's all
Gringo
Greek.
comes from the word griego. Okay? All right, so after a while we start sounding like this guy, because in this guy's world, everything comes from a Greek word, right? All right, so we have our own folk etymologies that the dictionary can kind of help us to flesh out, all right? So we're a postmodern era, okay? The story has value, but also knowing the history behind this is helpful to us as well. There's a history article that you can check out. It's by Leslie Bethel. It's called Brazil and Latin America. It's not too hard to remember the title. But historians often ask the same question that I start out with. Where is Latin America? And the answer when the term started was his. Okay? Am I getting everybody's pronouns right? If I get it wrong, let me know. Okay? So it starts out as, yes, it is Spanish America for people who are writing in Paris. Right? So it starts out as an intellectual thing, a poetic thing. Okay? It's like Nuestra América, right? Before it gets out to El Pueblo. Okay? So it's not something people used a lot, but that intellectuals were trying to think through because they were trying to think of how to defend their culture from El Gigante del Norte, how to keep the gringo from wrecking the place, is their mentality in the 19th century. Okay? So we've got Las Dos Americas. We've got a guy from Colombia, we got a Chileno, and we've got a guy who was from Panama, but Panama is Colombia, so it depends on how you look at things. So there were thinkers, but this is not how El Pueblo talks. All right? El Pueblo is going to start using it after another important change. Okay? France, like you guys mentioned, the Caribbean, right? Those are former colonies and departments, all right, of today. They're actual, officially there are parts of France still in Latin America, like French Guiana, for example, is as if it were just another provincia of France today. So the French had to come up with a propaganda campaign to say, we're here to liberate you, right? Just like the empires of today, we're always coming in to help people, or coming in to liberate people. So France, as part of their campaign, they come in saying, we're just like you. We like to party just like you. We're Catholic just like you. All right, we understand a European way that is way cooler, way more refined, civilized is how they would say it in the 19th century, than the barbaric gringos that would just come in and destroy your culture. We're going to help you, and we're going to help Mexico by taking it over, right? And so from that, we get the victory of the Battle of Puebla to kick out these French, right? To have Latin America speak for itself. That's been the struggle, is Latin America defining itself and speaking for itself. What do we celebrate the Battle of Puebla for? As Cinco de Mayo, all right? We have to explain this to our students because you come into Cinco de Mayo and they're like, Corona! And then they're like, why are we drinking Corona? Because it's
Mexican.
It's Mexican, but I mean, what do they think they're celebrating? At least in my,
Independence
with my
Day.
undergrads. I don't know about you guys, but we've got like some fantastic students here, but they
Independence Day.
think it's Independence Day, right? But Independence Day is in September, okay? So we're way off, okay? And we're way off because Cinco de Mayo is this celebration of a battle that didn't defeat the French, but it kind of turned the tide. It's to show that this poor country, this colonized country, this quote-unquote uncivilized country, because you guys know that 19th century, nothing is politically correct, all right? Like Sarmiento, civilización y barbarie. And you can guess who's on each side of that binary, right? So the quote-unquote bárbaros defeated the center of civilization, okay? And so that is when l'Amérique latine changes, okay? It's starting to work to define itself in unequal power relations, okay? Then it became something that's on everybody's lips through the post-World War II era, particularly during the Cold War, okay? This is all a big, grotesque chess game, all right? All these different empires are fighting to rule the world. And so they were literally carving up the planet into different zones of influence that were relatively homogeneous. And Latin America, they determined, was a relatively homogeneous unit that could be taken over and governed. And so that's when it becomes the region that we know now, and it becomes obvious to us to have Latin American studies centers. The first one started at Vanderbilt as a Brazilian studies center. It's important not to forget that because all too often when we say Latino America, we're thinking Spanish America, or we're thinking about the language that we teach, which in all of our cases, unless I misread the role, is Spanish, right? So Brazil is going to be part of Latin America that we shouldn't overlook. And these centers for studies, Centers for Latin American Studies, exploded all over the United States in 1959 because of one guy. Any guesses?
Come on. 59. In Cuba.
Castro?
Castro. It shocked the world. It's like Las Vegas declared independence. This is unthinkable, and there's a terrorist in power. We don't like him as a terrorist. So there's a guy that could blow us off the face of the earth, and we have no idea what they're doing down there. So we need all these Latin American studies centers to understand Latin America, this region that was relatively young, at least in our minds. So France is going to be part of Latin America. And the dictionary is going to reflect that, all right? So let's shift gears to a country-specific example. This is relevant to us even if we teach Spanish. Does anybody teach Caribe?
We're studying
Dialects.
Caribe. Nobody studies the Caribe here? Nobody works with Camilla Stevens? No? How interesting. Used to be.
Okay, so this is my home. My home is Caribe, and I work with Brazil as well because I work with African diaspora. I mean, that for me is the most direct and inarguable link, okay? So we talked about race not being just about the body, okay? It's how the body is interpreted. And we're interpreting these things through the ghosts of colonialism. An example of this is Haiti, okay? In the United States, you have a one-drop rule. One-drop rule says that if you have one black ancestor, voila, you are a black person, okay? You've got mixed identity, which is very, very recent. I mean, you've got to have civil rights acts. You've got to make it legal for people to marry. You've got to have these things emerging in history. But typically, a person with one black ancestor in the United States will be considered black. Barack Obama's mother was considered white, for example. Okay? In Haiti, you have one drop of blood, and you are a different race as well. If you have one drop of white blood, voila, you are a white person. Or you are considered a whitened person, all right, a mulatto person. Because in that context, you are closer to the center of power, all right? You're part of the dominant group, all right? What does that look like today? Okay, I just checked this guy out. He's a scholar working in Brazil. These are a couple of conflicts you see in Haitian society today. You got the Neganwo and Negamba. Notice that the word for man or woman is just going to be neg, all right? So it starts out as the word for quote-unquote Negro, right, for a black person, all right? And it evolves over time to mean just a guy, just a person, okay? Then you got a noir and ilat. I don't speak Creole, so I'm sure I'm not getting this right, okay? But then you've got two groups that are in conflict there. People who see themselves as black, people who see themselves as mulatto, okay? Then you've got urban versus rural divides, okay? So all of these things are going to inflect how we see race, okay? And then blanc is going to be anybody who's not from there. We were just talking about this with Megan at AATSP, which you should join and come out and hang out with us. We go to really cool places. We're going to Spain this summer. Okay, so this is an example of how race changes according to context, okay? According to the Haitian Constitution, if you are Haitian, you are black, including Polish people that helped them throw off the French, okay? You get to be honorarily black because you helped us win the war. So I mean, you see how it kind of comes loose from the base of biology here, right? Today, Milat is going to actually be a person who has wealth in Haiti, okay? Because the mulatto class were the people that had the most power in a colonial context, and they have maintained that power. That's the class of people that sent their kids to study in Paris, right? And so that was the group that was in power then. But let's look at how that changes according to geography in the French-speaking world, right? If you're in Seychelles in Africa, it's going to be a mulatto person, but it could also be a poor white person, right? So the poverty is going to change how people see your race. So this is an example of how race intersects with class in a colonial setting, okay? So I think that given these few examples, that when we teach about the French Revolution, which we're going to have to talk about in Spanish class as well, when I teach on human rights in Latin America, or I teach on human rights in Spain, those quote-unquote human rights are based on the rights of man and citizen. Where did they get the rights of man and citizen? From the French, when they come in and invade. Again, the colonialists come in to help the people that they've taken over. And the bright side, if you want to call it that, is the equivalent of the Bill of Rights. So you've got part of that history includes Haiti because Haiti was left out, right? Haiti was just too much money to let go, even in the context of the Enlightenment and the Haitian and the French Revolution. Okay, so we talked about the French section. All right, so let's move on to the Spanish section. We are continuing to have a debate in our country about symbols. And this is an example from the United States, but you can see similar examples throughout Latin America. Why is this guy bloody?
He probably killed a lot of people.
He probably did.
You know who
He
it is,
definitely
right?
did.
Everybody knows who it is.
It's Colón.
Oh, there you go.
Colón, and he's represented holding this orb because he's holding the world in his hands, and then he's pointing to say, "It's over there. I found it. It's mine." So why are people throwing red paint on it?
It has to do with fighting years of history being taught in a certain way, even in Latin American school. From the linguistic point of view, we use the word discover. Well, he didn't discover anything. So I think that it has to do with that, with changing the way we were thinking about history and about events from one
But you know, on the other, we demonize Columbus, right, Colón. But Colón wasn't trying to go kill people. He was trying to get to the Far East, right? So we forget this little piece of information. Colón had no idea what he'd found, right? So we demonize him appropriately. So I get it.
I think he's a symbol.
He's a
for-
symbol. That's exactly what he is. But I don't think he knew he was going to be killing people. I don't
Of course,
think.
and we cannot divide the world. We're academics, we're scholars.
Right.
We cannot divide the world with guys and bad guys.
Right.
So this is a very thing. It shows that he's the bad guy of the history, but there are a lot of different point of view.
Yeah.
So that's our
We get the
job
symbol,
here,
right?
to not see the world in good and bad guys.
Mhm.
That's my opinion.
Okay, so clearly, if they're throwing red paint on the guy saying stop celebrating genocide, thumbs down, right, is the opinion being expressed. So what's the other side to this?
I don't know too much about history. It's not my study. But of course, it's a process of history. In the process of history, there are a lot of things that happen in the moment, the context, etc. So I think our job, like professor, like instructor, is to show there are different ways to see the story, and there's no bad or good guys, of course.
Right.
Especially in this case, I mean,
Especially, of course.
especially in this case, because he had no idea that he was changing half of the world. He had no idea. He thought he found the Far East, right? It's really strange. But I don't disagree with the red paint. I get the red paint, right? At the same time, you can talk about history, right? But you can also see the point of the symbol, right? I do. Do you see that? You get it? Do you appreciate what's going on?
Well, and that's the continuing debate that we should foster. There are other things that you can, you said we can't divide the world into good and bad. We can also, another argument is we cannot divide the world or we cannot unify the world according to the values of our culture in 2022. There were no representative democracies in Columbus's world, and had not been for thousands of years. There was no notion of human rights. There was no notion of labor laws. So these are things that we need to debate. Well, so what do we take away from that? And I think that's a valid question and a valid debate that we should foster in our students. I bring this up because our dictionary's over 400 years of history, okay? Many of our students, at least when I do a good job in the classroom, is when I can find something that happened in the last 2 years, okay? Because a freshman 4 years ago was a high school student or was starting high school, right? And so they see this happening, and our dictionary and learning about this history helps us to understand it in a more nuanced way. And I think that's the direction your comment was going in, is that nuance that we need to bring to the discussion. So they're protesting Columbus throughout Latin America. Another valid question is, well, a student asked me this in human rights class, then what do we do with a country called Colombia? That's the name of the country. It's named for the guy.
Or cities in the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, all kinds of symbols. It's like if we take down the Columbus statue, what do we call this country that has been independent for many, many years? Okay, here's another case. Why do you have to change something named after Woodrow Wilson? That's the thing that I get with Confederate statues. Like Alabama still has a holiday for Jeff Davis's birthday.
They don't know who that is.
Huh? Jeff Davis? The president of the Confederate States of America. The other country that tried to secede from this one, right? And so you've got people celebrating another country's Independence Day, okay? But Wilson, this is our guy with all the problems in our elections, and we know we have problems in our elections, right? This guy was elected, okay? Why would students want to take his name off of a building? And the briefest answer, this would be a good discussion question for class, is, well, if we take his name off, whose do we replace it with? And what is the logic behind that? Okay, so we've got integration, people who symbolize integration, different cultures, different races working together. And that's a different way to give homage to people that reflects different values or an evolution of values. Okay, well, why would Haiti, for example, or the Dominican Republic, or Mexico, or any of the other places that Wilson took over during his term, you know, the United States literally invaded Mexico, right? This is the end of the revolution, and they had to settle things down. So Wilson is going to have an international impact. And so you've got a word like caco, which in Wilson's time was called a bandit. Okay, this is a troublemaker. Today we use the word terrorist, right? But for Haitians, this guy is a national hero because he wanted to kick out the Americans that had just invaded. Right, so that's what a capo would mean. So that changes our symbols and how we use them. So don't forget about the Haitian Revolution when you guys are teaching in Spanish class, because the Haitian Revolution is part of the origins of the Dominican Republic as well as of Haiti and that fraud history. It definitely relates to the terms we use for race and how they've changed and how they are infused and imbued with power. Okay? Now we're going to get discussion. And this is how Tom didn't get to talk.
That's the subtitle of this presentation. Or how Tom didn't get to
Or how
talk.
Tom didn't get to talk. And that wasn't my fault because we had some passionate people. Okay?
They were old fogies is what they were. You're not old fogies, so I'm waiting to hear your reaction to this.
So yeah, we'll see that.
Old fogies like me.
All right.
My age and older.
All right, we're going to have to use Facebook logic. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Who likes the term Latinx?
Am I the only person?
We got somebody on the fence. Tom likes it. I like it. It's questionable if my opinion should be
Mine
taken
too.
into account.
Emily's not sure.
So what are
She
some
wants
of
to
the...
tell you something.
Tell me.
Why I'm not sure is because I like the idea of being gender inclusive, but I think in Spanish, I like the term Latine better with the E at the end,
Mm-hmm.
because it makes more sense in agreement when you're speaking to someone non-binary, you use the E agreement, and so I think that makes more sense in the Spanish language to say Latine instead of Latinx. It's a little awkward, but I like the gender inclusivity.
And I think this is another generational element, is you just presume that we know what a gender-neutral person is, or gender-fluid person is. And so I think a lot of, we're talking about old fogies, is folks didn't have these terms to work with in the past. That's why you need a dictionary for identity terms, is so that we can all get on the same page. Because what I'm hearing from you is you are a well-read and empathetic or sympathetic person who says, I wouldn't want to be treated poorly, or I wouldn't want to be called by the wrong name, okay? When we think about these letters or these pronouns, that's like getting your name wrong, and then saying your name wrong over and over again. And so you're on the fence with it because you've got okay, I want to include people, I want to be a polite person, but it's hard to do this because of the structure of the language. So you've already answered my next question, which is, you've got a spectrum of human identity. You've definitely got more than two gender identities, and we've got people that reject the notion of gender and work to subvert it at every turn, every sentence, quite literally. And people are working to communicate in a world where that's a reality, because people are working to make the world more democratic. The problem is, and it gets so complicated because the language we're working with, the technology we're using, is medieval. Literally, even Latin had a gender form for neuter, right? Or neutral, a third option, right? Which may or may not work for everybody today, but it shows how people simplified things. They did something unnatural, which was to fit the world into two little boxes. And as you know, when we teach our 101 students, this is woman table. Why? I don't see any signifier in la mesa or anything in the actual object that connects it to femininity in any way, right? So gender is arbitrary, all right? We see it very clearly when we're talking about objects. Same thing happens with people. So people are working with competing systems, adding to that complexity, in order to reflect the spectrum of human identities that we can now recognize today with our knowledge and with our values. So this is not the first time that a group has done that, okay? We talked about colonial contexts, and the colonial context explains why if nothing else. We got great dirty jokes in this dictionary. We got the dirty jokes, we got the racist jokes, we've got the insults, we've got the thing that they called the son of a son of a son of a black person in a colonial context. Because they came up with, like, they're trying to make a caste system like you saw in India, right? Is to say you have more rights depending on where you were in this hierarchy. Okay, so what are some of the positive things that come from collecting these terms? The positive thing is that people find ways to describe themselves that they feel are relevant to themselves. All right, so we'll come back to Latinx in a second. We have the term black, for example, 1960s. You've got people say it loud, black and proud. Okay, you're taking something that was shameful and you make it a source of pride.
What's the term before black? What were black people called in this country before they used black? John's already said it once.
Negroes.
Thank you, the Negro. The Negro was the appropriate term for black until the 60s, when black people vindicated the term.
They claimed it.
Like queer being vindicated by gay people.
That's an example. Mexican. I think this is Texas. Texas finds a way to to be willfully. I love the pronunciations, Jacinto and all of these. The willfully wrong pronunciation of the Spanish. The othering of Mexican people. All right, they would use the word Mexican as an insult. Right, they would use the words like Chicano or Chicano, right, or something along those lines, as an insult to put down people that were marginalized in that context. But then in the 60s, along with black rights, black power movements, you see people claiming this term, claiming this identity, all right? Where does the word Chicano come from? It comes from Mexica, all right? Who are the Mexica? They were the first Mexicanos, right? The first Mexican people, the Aztecs, right? These are the Aztecs. So the Chicano is saying, I'm proud of who I am. Yes, I am Mexican, and I'm proud of being indigenous in a context where the only thing you could be proud of at the time was of being white and civilized in all of these colonial terms, right? So Chicano is a way to reject that and say, this is who I am, okay? Another argument with the Latinx debate is that, well, it's just one letter. Why do people make such a big deal about it? Well, why do Puerto Ricans not want to be Puerto Ricans? That was the official name of the country, of the island when the United States took it over. They changed the name from Puerto Rico to Puerto Rico.
There's a meme on Twitter right now. There's a little dog that has this strange little, and there's somebody who's obviously Puerto Rican who stands in the background and says something like, he looks like a Puerto Rican. He's a Puerto Rican. You haven't seen this meme? It's really powerful because this silly little dog has kind of a curly hair and kind of a darky skin, right? And using the derogatory term, not Puerto Rican, but Puerto Rican, which is what my father always said, Puerto Rican. He could never say Puerto Rican. Puerto Rican. And that short I-E there makes the complete difference, right? Puerto Rican.
So why'd they have to change it to Puerto instead of Puerto?
It's easier to say in English.
It's easier to say in English, right, than fit the phonetics. All right, so yes, Saussure is right. Language is arbitrary. It's a closed arbitrary system, but power is influencing, whose phonetics get to be chosen. And so when you have documents that, legal documents that make Puerto Ricans United States citizens, when you have documents that make them a free associated state, the only one in the world, then you're going to see the name of the island, Puerto Rico, okay? Because that's what people wanted it to be called locally. So yes, one letter or two letters does matter because it shows who has power in this context, right? The notion of being Latino or Latina in the first place in the United States context also has a history because the powers that be were trying to decide what to call this minority, okay? Well, first we got to figure out who these people are and why are we trying to define them this way? And so government officials came up with the term Hispanic. They tried Spanish. People didn't know what that meant. Okay, they're not from Spain, right? They tried brown, but they're like, oh, that's not going to work. I mean, even the racists are like, well, which brown people are we talking about? It gets confusing, right? So they couldn't keep the term straight. So they decided they decided to find a term to refer to this minority. Why did they want to define this minority? Well, they defined this minority. What's that?
What's the people who decide this?
Oh, these, you're looking at U.S. Census Bureau, but this actually started in the Johnson administration. So Johnson was...
So what, like a survey or a census, something like that? How
You're looking at, you're counting for multiple reasons, okay? Something that's being debated right now in the Supreme Court, affirmative action. Can you count whether or not there are black people getting jobs they could not get before, okay? Well, black people are not the only group that have been discriminated against in this country. How can you count the Hispanic people in this case that are getting jobs or not, right? And so that would be one application of it. A more pragmatic use for that is if I'm a politician, how can I do what Kennedy did and get a voting bloc to vote for me? Okay, so if I'm a conservative, I'm going to say I have family values like the Hispanic people, or I have business opportunities that will appeal to the Hispanic people. Okay, so not everything is coming from a charitable place here, right? It's always coming from a strategic place. So you're looking at Johnson, you're looking at Nixon. Nixon was trying to appeal to delegate-heavy states, California, Texas, right, where you have a lot of people. And that has to do with why they were picking who was Hispanic that most interested them. Mexican people, or Mexican-American people, and Puerto Rican people, because they could vote. Because they can vote, okay?
So it's always power.
It's always power. It's always power, and it tends to go up, right? So the government, to make a long story short, wants the group to be called Hispanic. And therein lies the central problem. Okay? A lot of community activists felt that this was a top-down imposition. And they wanted to call themselves Latino or Latina. Because they wanted to say, I am not from Spain. I'm not from Spain because Spain is European and we are not. Why are we not? Because I'm proud to be indigenous. I mentioned that before. I'm proud to be Chicano, right, from the Mexica, from the Aztec. Puerto Ricans, on the island at least, they have a term called Hispanophilia, being so in love with Spain that you forget your own culture, right? Your own culture is going to include African elements, indigenous elements. So that's why people were looking to Latino, Latin music, all right? They're looking to a pan-ethnic coalition that was grassroots, okay? So these terms were very fluid for a long time. They've only evolved over the course of about 40 years. It's still evolving today to Latinx, or as we mentioned, Latine, or Latine. And so you've got Latinx, which you tend to hear in the United States, and then you get rebuttals like we got in ABTSP with, oh, well, this is something that the United States does. You don't do that in Latin America. No Latin Americans are going to do this. Okay, so it's seen as an imposition. How much is an imposition and how much is just phobia? These are the two sides of the debate that come to mind. Okay, you got Latinx, part of an evolution of inclusivity. All right, you hear Latino, Latina, Latino, Latina, Latino, Latina a lot to include women.
Do you realize that that's one of the few nouns in English marked for gender? English doesn't typically mark an ending for gender, because at one time there were Latino women, and all of a sudden we started using Latina, and not Latina, but Latina, with the English pronunciation. Do you ever think about that? English doesn't mark O-A. We don't. We have E-S-S-E, which we've lost. A waiter, waitress, that's gone. Poet, poetess, that's gone. We don't mark that anymore.
But it's a case of borrowing, right?
It's a borrowing.
The word
We borrowed the whole
English
word.
from
We
Spanish.
borrowed the gender from Spanish. right? Which is very unusual for a Germanic type English language, right?
But according to William Luis, Spanish borrowed it from English first, because Latin music was how they sold Cuban music, how they sold Latin American music. Okay, so it's always been a hybrid.
And the original Latin was an Italian, a Latin lover of what's his name? From the
Casanova.
silent movie. Casanova and the silent movie guy. Valentino. He was a Latin lover.
Mhm.
Ricky Ricardo was a Latin lover.
Mhm.
Remember?
Right. So the notions of gender with this term have also evolved, okay? And there's kind of this, if you're an average person or a more conservative person, you're gonna say, okay, oh, we gotta include women too. Okay, all right, we'll do that. Okay. All right, so we gotta include the gay people. Okay, yeah. But wait, okay, yeah. But now we got to do non-binary, non-conforming, gender-fluid people. I am confused, okay? And sometimes people get mean when they're confused, okay? And that's the reality. We have to acknowledge the phobia. We also have to acknowledge the complexity, okay? And you've got multiple systems in play, all right? So what I hear is you're going to hear le Latinx, okay? Or le Puertorriqueñex, okay? For those who are trying to remove the gender ending from these terms, okay? It takes a little while, you're going to fumble at first, but once you get into it, it's going to make more and more sense to you. I've had the chance to do this, and I think I'm honored, I think it's great, to do this in an immigration conference of people who work with nonprofits that work with immigrants, right? Particularly undocumented immigrants, okay? We know that women are abused crossing the border into the United States. We know that a coyote is going to do what a coyote wants because of power, right? He can do what he wants. The same kind of violence is happening against LGBTQ people, okay? And so these people make it into the country, and we wanted to create a safe space for them, for people who've had very, very little safe space. And so the goal is to use this language to say, I'm not going to hurt you, okay? And it goes back to what you were saying. I want to work with you, right? I want to be a polite person. I want to be a person who's not here to harm, okay? So you've got Latinx, Puertorriqueñex, les niñex, okay? Siempre hay un lugar para las niñex, okay? And, okay, one argument is, well, this is the United States. Yes?
Yeah, I have a question. So basically, in the slide before, you put like Puertorriqueñex,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like the E with the X.
Yes.
So
Those are-
basically, yeah, I was going to ask, because I thought that when you put the X, when you put the E, it's not necessary to put the X. Or is the X for like non-binary people?
Yes.
It's not that inside
And
of
some,
the E.
they
already?
often write it with an X, but the way it's pronounced is Puerto Riqueñex. And so some people write the EX there.
And this is
It's just a
evolving.
writing convention is all it is.
Yeah, the orthography is evolving, so I've seen both.
Okay. No, yeah, it's just interesting.
I have two.
Because like for me, like the X has always like a bit of a conflict in the sense that I think everything can get in the E, but it's a personal. Like,
Yeah. It'll change. It's going to evolve.
And part of that debate over, okay, which form are we going to use is going to be national origin. To my knowledge, the X is from here, from the Latinx community, okay? Les Argentines, okay, nobody's going to tell you that Argentina is not part of Latin America except an Argentinian, right? Okay, we're the special folks, okay, we have our own country. Some of the older folks will be like, yeah, I'm just European. But Europe's way over there. No, I'm here though, so I'm European, right? So Argentina, very proud nation. As if we don't have our
No
own
hay negros en
exceptional
Argentina.
chaos, right?
I tell you quite clearly, no hay negros en Argentina. No hay.
Por ejemplo.
Sí, hay, Tom, no digas eso.
Claro que sí, chica, no sé.
Ah,
Pero
ok.
todavía tengo un
Presidente.
video que mira, me muestra un número que dice, anoche te mandé el enlace. No hay negros en Argentina, and there in the público were two Afro-Argentine women. At least two. So of course there are, but that's a view, right?
So that fits into the exceptionalism of Argentina, okay? And so this is organic, Okay, this is something that people decided they wanted to do. And this is a young woman here that you see marching for women's rights. You hear a lot about feminicidios or femicidios, depending on the term that you use. Feminist movements throughout Latin America. We do an exchange program with the UNAM. Okay, they shut down the UNAM for an extended period of time because of these protests. People want to see women stop dying, right? What coalitions do people form with language to do that? One way to do that is through inclusive language or gender-neutral language. Here's a sentence in it. Somos les pibis, les soldades de Perón. All right, so going back to what you were saying, Latine is being used. And where does Latine come from? It comes from Argentina. This is not los gringos, otra vez. Los gringos no están invadiendo. Eso dicen, okay, because they want to manipulate the debate and say, okay, my phobias are justified because we're being invaded. Okay, we got multiple vectors of power in play. And we'll see what comes out of this. Languages evolve. Okay, if you're a linguist, you're a scientist of language. And if you're a scientist of language, you're observing evolution in practice. Okay, I've still got 13 minutes just for total open discussion. I'm going to leave it right there. What questions and ideas have come to mind? How can we use this in our classes, and how can we, what's the answer to the question, so what, at this point?
So what? That's what my students say every night, John. So what?
Yes.
I was curious if, while you were working on the dictionary, did you get some feedback from actual people? Because my impression and my idea is that Latinx is a term that is very convenient for us academics and in academia. But I think I was reading an article the other day that they make like a pool for Latinx community, and they didn't like the term and they didn't agree with the term. And another conflicting idea that I have is that it's very, I don't know how to say this in English, help me Tom. Homogeneizador. It's like we put everything under this umbrella term, and my question is if that at some point erases all the different identities that we have throughout Latin America. Because we have in this country we have immigrants from all over the world, and I don't see that process happening to any other communities. We don't have a term for East Europeans. It's like we are somehow validating all those different identities, but we are putting all the people from Latin America under the
at one time they
Latinx.
did lump everybody together as East European. But in the coal mines of Pennsylvania, for example, there were a bunch of people who came from Eastern Europe, and the gringos there would call them Slavish, Slavish, not Slavic, because it included Hungarians, it included anybody who they considered different from Eastern Europe who didn't speak German or English. So we did at one time have that homogenic. So that was the immigrant group of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, right? The Latinos, the Mexicans, and the were coming in that. So now we have this 50 million population that we got to do something with, right? So we're trying to we want them all in a nice package, right? But we already know it doesn't work, right?
I'm going to quote the great Cuban-American scholar Gustavo Pérez Firman. Latina la tuya. Okay? Mi madre no es latina. Okay? Ella es cubana. Cubana de pura cepa. Okay?
The man's crazy, so don't listen to anything he says. I know him very well. No, he's a good guy. I'm just kidding. So he's very interesting. He does say that kind of thing.
He's a provocateur. We'll call him that. He loves debate. He loves to be politically incorrect. Okay, and it comes again from exceptionalism. Okay, I'm contractually obligated to give Argentinians a hard time. I'm married to a Brazilian. I mean, I have to mess with Argentina. But like all of our countries have their own exceptionalisms. We're special for some reason. We're told that because of nationalism, right? We have nations that define who we are versus other areas, and there are problems with that. There are problems when we talk about Latinx immigration. Okay. Cubanos are welcome with open arms until los Marielitos turn everybody into Scarface, okay? And then it just goes downhill from there, okay? You got Puerto Ricanos, okay? U.S. citizens, okay, that don't have the option of being undocumented. So why would they vote or think or make decisions based on whether or not people are undocumented? Okay, Dominicanos, many of them are undocumented, all right, because they came in as exiles from the Civil War, the Balaguer, okay? They take out Trujillo. Guys, if there's a test about the Dominican Republic in your life, 9 out of 10 questions, the answer, Trujillo. Trujillo did it, okay? Most of the 20th century, 21st century novels, Trujillo, okay? He was bad when he was there, he was almost as bad when they took him back out, because then the country falls into chaos, okay? People are leaving, they're coming in seeking to flee from violence, or I'm sure seeking asylum. So you have undocumented people, okay? So that goes back to the problems and the mystery of the quote-unquote Latino vote. There's no Latino vote. I mean, you've got 20 different nationalities, different classes, different races, all these different things, and there's a problem with homogeneity. You see that in the case of Marta Moreno Vega, in the case of BIPOC. First off, most people who are BIPOC don't know what BIPOC is.
Right.
This, a what?
You know what the word is? BIPOC.
Brown, indigenous, people of color.
That's it. BIPOC. It's an acronym.
Yeah. Well, I've heard black, right? So
Black or brown, either one.
Yeah, black or brown. Okay, so we got African Americans in the group, and so it becomes very problematic because different groups will, whether they do or not, will definitely see that they have different interests, right? Or not immediately understand that they're part of the coalition, or maybe not agree with why they were put into that coalition at all. Other questions?
What about Brazil? Because we saw, if we were watching with Danielle last year, he had two trans presenters. One from, I can't remember her name, from Brazil.
Pablo Vittar.
What?
Pablo Vittar.
That's the one. And the other one is Puta da Silva, who lives in Portugal now. And they were both using, she comes out, the first one comes out on the stage and she says, what she used, Boa noite todos. Boa noite todos. And she spoke like that the entire time. She used the E at the end. At the end of that. And is that happening in Brazil? Is that happening in Portuguese?
I see it, for example, in Cadernos Negros. If you study black literature in Brazil, you will hear the name Cadernos Negros because it's the first widely known journal of black literature in Brazil.
Cuadernos negros in Spanish.
Yeah. So from one issue to the next, poof, X's appeared out of nowhere.
X's appear.
Yeah, X's appeared.
Wow.
Right. So, Ush, spelled with a U, Ush negre, negrish, negrish. I'm working on it. Okay, so that's,
Wow.
it's great that people are being included.
Who's negrish?
Yes.
Not es negro.
It's great that people are being recognized, and it's jarring to speak in a new way without a lot of priming. Yes.
Yeah, now I just wanted to talk a little bit about my experience in the classroom with the pronouns.
Sure.
So basically, the pronouns for me is a really interesting topic because I'm having queer diaspora in a sense.
Uh-huh.
So I've been trying to find a system in which the Spanish language can work well with this. But the problem that I'm struggling with right now in the Spanish classroom is that I believe that it's really difficult to teach students the usage of pronouns when they are not even we don't even know how to work with them. So the problem that I'm finding right now is that I have some students that they identify as non-binary, or they have a non-standard, let's say that way, way of seeing themselves. But the problem is that they are a lot of problematics in the sense that with the E, adding that, the students, when speaking is easy because you just know that you need to address with an E or change some of the gender with an E. But the problem is that when it comes to writing and they have to develop a narrative, and these gender get confused all the time with the direct object and with verbs and with forms, and it gets so confusing. So sometimes I believe when they're starting to learn Spanish, introducing the gender this E is really problematic because they start like getting confused with everything. And
Right.
because there's no book that tells you what is right.
They're developing them.
Yeah,
They're developing those books.
But for example,
Yeah,
like
yeah. For example,
yeah, no, I was going to say that even like I'm from Spain, so in Spain this is not really explored at all. If you study like Spanish in Spain, Spanish literature, major, minor, masters, name it, and you know that if you send an abstract and you're using the E, or you're like sending like a paper to a professor or whatever, and you're not specifying that you're using it because of a reason, they'll tell you that that is grammatically incorrect.
Sadly, I'm not surprised. I mean, you get declarations from the guys that make the dictionary, right? You get declarations from the RAE that say that we will not accept these things. And again, power is in play with this. What I do with my students, you guys may do something different. Like we've all been trained to do, you ask people what their pronouns are. Typically, private conversation, and say, well, what pronouns do you prefer? Okay, well, I prefer masculine pronouns. Okay, well, or I prefer they. Right, you have a student that prefers they in English. And I explain to them, okay, if you're in 101, this is the system, and I'm going to do my best to work with you and to communicate with you in the way that makes you feel comfortable. However, this is going to be a challenge. Okay, it's going to be a challenge because you've got two options that have been naturalized. Okay, it should not be that way, but it is that way. Do you want to use the masculine pronoun or the feminine pronoun to start out for basic communication? And in my experience, my genderqueer students have said, yes, I prefer to do that. Now, ethically, I ask them what they prefer. And I also present at the intermediate level. We do have a whole class that is in gender-inclusive language. We start out with I Spy. Right? Now, this is the hardest game of I Spy I've ever played. Like, veo une persone europee. And so they'll kind of struggle through it. And I stop them and I say, well, imagine if this were your whole life. You guys have struggled through the game for 15 minutes. If someone were calling you the wrong thing through your whole life, how alienating would that be? Okay? And if a person were to say to me, okay, I feel more comfortable communicating right now, please use this with me, I would do that.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that it's still a challenge, because you're right, it still is in evolution, and it's something that is going against the grain, but it's not because it's right, it's because we've gotten used to it.
Yeah, it's not covered in the textbooks, so they basically, when they're like learning, they get the textbook and they try to learn, but then putting like the pronouns, the new pronoun system on top of it, and it's very
So,
complicated.
conectate is already including them.
Oh, nice.
Yes, conectate.
That's a good one. I knew
It's,
that it was being developed, I didn't know it was already.
it's commonly treated like the new vosotros, like most people from Latin America, we know vosotros is there and then we just kind of step around it, okay? But at least there's that much representation to say it is there, you should recognize it. And if you're a teacher who is really passionate about this, or a teacher that wants to include this, it's there to back you up to say, it's not just me saying it, look, this is how people are going to be communicating across the country.
Yep.
Okay, well, folks, we are
I just wanted to add
sure.
to what he was saying, that I think also the problem is that even at 400 level, the gender agreement is not fully acquired at all.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's probably the error that I correct most.
Yeah.
So it adds like a complexity, but the problem is still there even if you're just working with masculine.
Me too.
femininity.
And I've been,
It's everywhere, it's very
I've been speaking
everywhere.
Spanish for 50 years.
It's not
and I
like
still
some
don't-
things like that.
It's fascinating, though, it's fascinating. You know, but this only applies to, you realize that this change only applies only to people. La mesa is still la mesa.
Yeah.
You gotta remember that, right? So you'll have a tripartite system at least. At least, right? So we're going back to something neutral, something masculine, and something feminine, right? The words are relative. Masculine and feminine are relative because Latin called them that, right? The Latin grammarians called them
And
that.
I don't know if you remember Harris, his thesis, he said that like we have verbs finished with R, finished verbs with R and ear, we have words that finish with O, and the word finish with O, it's not a masculine morpheme, it's there a pair of words that finish with O.
Right.
And finish with A, so
Right.
it's not masculine or feminine,
Right.
it's just a list of words
We've
that.
made it that way.
Yes.
We've assigned masculine and feminine to those categories,
It's
right?
just a-
That don't work because we have la mano, right? They don't work. We know that. El agua, why? Well, there's a reason historically for el agua, but it's fascinating. It's gonna take another generation. It's gonna take people Emily's age maybe, not you guys who are just a little older than Emily, but people Emily's age to make this decision.
Who knows?
Bad Bunny's on board. Pablo Vitale's on board. I think that pop culture is gonna have a huge.
Yeah,
huge
pop culture
role in
will
this.
do it. That's what's gonna happen.
Okay, folks, don't be a stranger, all right? I'm JT Maddox at UAB. Let's keep in touch. Thank you again so much. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you. Thanks to John and Luciana. If any of you wants to stay a minute and talk to John, that's fine. They're hanging around here for lunch. If you want to go with them to lunch and talk to them about anything you want to, that's fine. There's no obligation. I'm going to go in on a plane and go to Indianapolis, so I'm leaving them alone. So you can take them to lunch, you can and ask for reimbursement. Daisy and Carolyn and I will reimburse you if you take these two nice people to lunch. And if you can talk more about your work and their work, and if you don't want to, that's fine too. Nobody's going to be upset. Okay, thanks for coming. Yes.
Thank you guys all for coming. Please make sure you signed in on the
The
sheet.
paper.
If your
Everybody
name is
sign the
not
paper up
there,
here.
put it on the
Emily?
bottom. And we are going to be sending out an email to everyone who attended we have an evaluation for all of our workshops. So if you could please fill out the evaluation, it'll be on Qualtrics.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you all for coming.
Now, let us one of the heads of our translation program, translation interpreting. Let's go, Laura. Laura's a multilingual guy. Many languages.
No. I'm sending an email saying thank you for all you guys for coming. Thank you. This was very cool.
The evaluation I'm gonna go actually sign.
No, I didn't get my
Okay, we'll keep that in mind. No.
Go. You did.
Because it was coma, like.
How are you? Yeah.
It was just 2 hours.
Oh,
I love fall.
good.
I know, me too.
I'm a fall.
Cute.
Winter too, but yeah.
But somebody will take care of it, I promise.
I know.
Jorge?
This is my
Ludia. Ludia's sick. She has
Oh, no.
Jorge.
Winter's coming.
Jorge's- He's got
Next
knees
week.
bouncing,
Yeah.
so it's even better.
Thank you.
Everything's there for him to do. Good luck, you'll be fine. They'll take care of you. Ariela, did you like Ariela? These pens are for you guys. Hey,
These pens are for
these pens are
us.
for you. Come on.
They're for me.
Oh my God, they're for everybody. They left them here.
Oh, they're so nice.
Take more. Good, how are you?
I'm gonna give it to my students.
Oh, yeah, here, take a picture you want.
Oh my god.
Can I have for my students too?
Yeah,
I have 8.
take as many as you want.
I mean,
Take as many as you want.
Please, please.
There are plenty there. Hand them out to your friends. We bought these for you guys.
It makes me happy.
Right.
Well,
I don't think